Hello again. All right, I've got another case study for you. If you missed what I was doing, it's in the last video or two that I posted. I'm doing some case studies where we're going to talk about traditional business decision making, strategic intelligence decision making, and how AI is going to make it that much easier. So the second case study I want to talk about, I worked with this business back in March of 2022. It was a little restaurant, really fun little restaurant that had opened, and they were doing really well. The owners of this restaurant had worked for several years, had a good following. Then they decided to open a brick and mortar location instead of just doing like their catering and stuff. And really, when I came in originally, they were doing really well. They were doing about $1,000 a day, which is about $30,000 a month. But we discovered that actually, in order to make everything work the way they wanted to, they needed to have about $1,500 a day daily average. And let me explain how this works. There's something called the breakthrough number. It's financial intelligence, and it breaks down four walls of your business. Access to buyers, so your rent, your utilities and all that, your critical operating expenses. For them, they're a restaurant, they have food costs, so we have some inventory cost and spend we have to look at. And then, oh, there's little sweat bees. And then we have to look at payroll expenses. And, you know, what's interesting, depending on the kind of brick and mortar business that you're in, you know, there's different traditional ways to look at revenue. One would be like, you know, what you need to earn per square foot, for example, in certain retail environments, or how often you have to turn tables, or what you're doing inside, you know, a restaurant. But traditional intelligence would have told them, hey, you know what, now it's time to do the traditional restaurant playbook. So you're going to increase the number of hours, you're going to increase maybe some of the menu items, and do those kinds of things. And they were opening, I think it was at 11. It's either 10 or 11 because they were doing lunch and dinner. And we got into strategic intelligence looking because their labor costs during certain times of the day were a little higher. They didn't have the foot traffic. Now, granted, it was only open for a little bit, so we didn't have all the data we needed. But what we did do is we started to do some market intelligence and competitive intelligence gathering. And instead of just saying, you know, hey, let's just, you know, go ahead and increase your hours, increase your menu, and do those kinds of things, we noticed a couple of things that were really to their advantage. One was that there wasn't a lot of breakfast competition, grab and go breakfast competition. We looked at their location, their strategic location, and we realized that there were only actually two other restaurants in the area that were offering any kind of breakfast items at all. And there was also some construction going on in front of one of the two stores, and that store was no longer really offering a lot of breakfast because of the construction, making it difficult to find parking and those kinds of things. Sometimes shit like that just happens, and you have to be ready to capitalize on it if you see that it's available to you and an opportunity. So we did a little bit more investigation about pricing, about what people might be looking for, about the grab and go options for breakfast that they could do, and really sort of what the traffic was in front of this brick and mortar location. And then, you know, timing it around when the businesses around them would open, but then also how people would travel through times of the day. That kind of thing, because they did have a pretty brisk takeout business. So basically what we did was we did some cost-benefit analysis across a couple of opportunities, and one really showed that the breakfast opportunity in that moment was actually likely going to be the higher revenue driver and give them that extra revenue that they needed. Now remember, the cost per day, it's not a hugely tricky formula, but if you're open 7 days a week, the number you divide what you need weekly is by 7, obviously, to get your daily or your hourly rates. If you're open 4 days, if you're open 6 days. So the $14.90, I don't remember if it was because they were open 4 days or 6 days, whatever it is, that was what their number was. And we were able to show that the additional, you know, $500 a week or so could easily come from first implementing that, what we call breakfast line of revenue. And it didn't actually, they already had people there like doing prep early and stuff. So it wasn't going to add more than, I think it was 12 labor hours for the entire week, the way that we had worked it out. And there was some overlap with the kitchen staff. And it was a limited menu, so we could control the food costs. The margins are really good for breakfast. They're actually better than dinner when you look at a lot of different things. And then we were able to really instead of like doing an expanded lunch menu, or increase their marketing spend, we actually just implemented this grab and go breakfast idea, and it took off and it did really well. Now, obviously, when all the construction was done and stuff, there was increased competition, so they had to do things the right way to increase the number of loyal customers, people who would come and see them, a couple days a week or whatever. But yeah, the breakfast service was implemented from 8 to 10:30 with a very limited menu. I think they had maybe 6 items. And with most of the existing staff and kitchen capability, they had to open up one more person to be available at the register. But again, traditional restaurant growth would have suggested simultaneously expanding into multiple areas like dinner hours, lunch menu, increased marketing spend, and launching service delivery like for your lunches. Basically, what ended up happening, though, is we were able to capture the revenue just by recognizing there was this huge gap in an available breakfast service that the community needed where they were located, and it turned out to do really, really well. So again, in 2025, using AI, definitely would have been able to, within 30 minutes, get some of that competitive analysis and get some of those things like, hey, do, these particular things, use these prompts, and you can identify these gaps that might be lower risk to implement. Breakfast service has a lower risk, lower food costs generally, unless you're doing something really crazy. And, without adding so much additional labor costs. And so it kept it pretty profitable. So in 2025, AI, I think, is truly going to make a difference. The framework was the same. We went through the breakthrough number and the market analysis and did those things. Manually, though, it took a lot more time back in 2022. Today, that research could be knocked out in probably under 2 hours. So I have actually put together a free 5 AI prompts sort of lead magnet, if you want to call it that or whatever, where you can try it for yourself. So if you have a business and you're looking at expansion, or you have a couple of different things you want to consider, you have multiple opportunities to evaluate, I've got some free prompts that'll take you through pricing, market intelligence, risk analysis, competitive positioning, that kind of thing. So if you want that, it's on my website, dawnkennedy.com. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep bringing you all of the case studies. These are in the white paper. Not everybody wants to read the white paper, I get it. But I'm going to show you how traditional business thinking would have done, what strategic intelligence actually showed and what we did. And then now today in 2025 with the AI being available, how we can leverage that to make sure that Main Street gets the strategic intelligence to make better decisions with more risk mitigation than they used to. It's not just for enterprise businesses anymore. Have a great weekend.